Okay, hello everyone. I hope you're all well. Um, I know we haven't done an episode since Christmas, but we've both been super busy with other things, as I say on pretty much every episode. But we're glad to be
Yeah, real
back.
life
I
gets
know,
in the way.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad to be back. We're both glad to be back with a new episode, and today we're going to look at, um, I think, a series that we both mutually latched onto when we were talking about manga that we were excited about and reading. Maybe it was about, I want to say it was like almost a year ago, wasn't it, Jake?
I would say so. At least a year
Yeah,
ago. Yeah, at
at
least a
least
year
a
ago.
year. Yeah, and it's one of these series that we both talk about having read recently and keeping up to date with it, but we've never actually done an episode on it. So I think we both mutually felt that our first episode of the year should be for this series. So the series we're going to talk about today is very popular, and it is DanDaDan. So, Jake, do you want to start us off with our intro, and we can just jump straight into it?
Sure, I'm Jake,
And I'm Cam.
and we've got issues. So, yeah, go ahead. You've got the physical copy there,
Yeah,
Cam. So,
yeah,
why don't you just go ahead and show that?
sure. So this is Volume One. I think currently in in the Western world, at least the US and the UK, we're up to I think volume 12 or volume 11 rather, volume 11. So this series has been on the radar for many uh, manga fans, anime fans, and there's very good reason for it. So it's written and drawn by Yukinobu Tatsu. Now, I was not aware that the mangaka had actually worked with Tatsuki Fujimoto, who did Chainsaw Man, Look Back, and a number, and most famous for Chainsaw Man, I'd probably say. Tatsu Sensei would, I think he started off as a assistant for Fujimoto, so you can see a lot of the influences in terms of his art style and almost I'd say some of the humor as well. There's some kind of there's a little bit of a DNA from sort of Fujimoto style. Anyway, shall we let's get into what the story is about? For the maybe the one person on the planet who hasn't had some exposure to DanDaDan at this point, given that there's a very successful anime adaptation as well. So, as an overview, there are two main characters. We follow Momo Ayase, and she's a high school girl, and her classmate is known as Okuran. And these two are completely polar opposite personalities. So, our Momo is quite a popular girl in her school. She's got a lot of attitude, and she's I would say a very confident individual. Whereas Okuran, the boy, is the complete opposite of that. He's very much a very nerdy, sort of, I would say, reserved individual who's very timid, but also has a very big heart and is a someone who wouldn't actually believe he would ever have a chance of sort of getting to know Momo because they come from two very different worlds. Um, Jake, anything that you'd like to add before I jump into the main premise here in terms of their characters?
Yeah, the cool part is it kind of starts off in the first chapter really starts off showing their predicaments, like and setting up their characters in kind of a
Yeah,
funny way. Um, so Okarun's actual character name is Ken Takakura, and um, Momo has a big girl crush on the actual actor Ken Takakura, who's very famous in Japan. And
yeah,
it starts off the series with this kind of you have to know a lot about popular Japanese culture, like popular
Mm,
Japanese and movie culture, in order to
yeah,
understand
yeah,
some of the references.
yeah,
And I haven't watched the anime, but having seen little clips on YouTube and such, I think they even expand upon that even more. They have more fun with the fact that it's an in joke. You have to
yeah,
kind of be on the in joke of knowing Japanese popular culture in order to kind of get some of the gags. Um,
yeah,
as far as the overview, it starts off like your typical shonen manga, wherein you get the timid but smart character, and then he's paired with the really slightly tomboyish um, female character, but um, they both end up finding things out about each other that attracts them to each other, and that's also one of the things that starts off in the first chapter is the will they or won't they um, kind of romance in a way. So yeah, that's one of the main things that
yeah,
kind of you want to find out. You're just like, oh, wait a second. So here's where the chemistry is going to start. And that's the fun
yeah,
part of going through DanDaDan is to kind of go like, okay, what's gonna go in the way of get in the way of what is possibly going to happen between these two? Because the setup is really these two main protagonists and how they end up in these kind of weird and wacky and horrific situations.
yeah, yeah, and the so just to give a basic premise as to how these two characters interact and the adventures they go on. So what I like about these two is that they're polar opposites in terms of their personalities. However, they have a shared love or an otakuness in a way. They both geek out on two particular areas, and for Momo, it's supernatural entities, you know, supernatural forces and just ghosts in general. Whereas Okran is obsessed with aliens, and so they're both into these really occult, sort of niche sort of interests, and they bond eventually. And I won't spoil how they come together, but they bond over these two these two loves in their lives, these two interests. So once the story gets going, the main premise is that they both want to wager that their particular interest is more real, or they can prove their belief over the others. So, for example, Momo and Okran decide that there are two different places in their city, um, where they can see examples of these phenomena. So they both challenge each other basically. So, for example, Momo mentions that there's an abandoned hospital, and she's going to go there to because there are rumors of aliens being sighted in that abandoned hospital. Whereas Okran goes to this tunnel, that has all these urban legends around it that there is some kind of spirit, some spiritual activity or supernatural activity, and they basically decide that okay, well, let's go and see whether there's any truth to any of these urban legends, if you like. Um, Now, what happens as a result of that is that, you know, this is not a spoiler; it's the basic premise of the story, that they both, on opposite ends, are able to prove that actually these supernatural or these otherworldly entities do exist, including the existence of spirits and aliens. Um, so what happens as a result of that is, for example, Okran, when he goes to this tunnel, he finds that there's a spirit known as Turbo Granny, and as ridiculous as the name sounds, um, this particular spirit possesses him, and if you like, he gains special powers. Both of them gain special powers as a result of their interactions with these two phenomena. So Momo goes to the hospital, and she's abducted by these aliens. They call themselves the Serpo. Is that right?
That's right.
Um, yeah. So and as a result, they both come away having learned, or rather, uh, adopted these powers because they interacted with these two phenomena. So, Momo has sort of psychokinetic powers where she can sort of lift things and kind of like the Force, I guess. And then Okuron can turn into a sort of Super Saiyan like creature, which is basically Turbo Granny possessing him really and turning him into this super powerful version of himself, who's also hilariously a really depressed version of himself. So he's super powered, but he's also really negative about everything, and everything's just a massive bummer, which again is part of the humor here. So you mentioned a little bit, Jake, about the romantic elements to the story. So with all of the zaniness, with all of the crazy setup, for me at least, what kept me reading was the fact that there's so much great character interaction and chemistry between Momo and Okron. They're just really lovable, naturally drawn characters, and um, they really come into their own within the first volume. So it's I think it has to be said that um, Tatsu Sensei really develops the characters very very well within a very short period of time. So that's a general overview of the story. But what develops from there, and I'm not going to give any spoilers. Well, neither of us will. What develops from there is a an almost episodic, but a really interesting character, I suppose, driven action shonen. But I would say that it's unique in the sense that it focuses on the characters rather than the spectacle. Um, so, Jake, what should we talk about first? Should we talk about the writing in terms of sort of
Yeah,
how these
let's go with that. I think
Yeah,
I'll start with I'll go with how it takes a lot of inspiration from what came before it. Like, of course, as the series goes forward, you get a whole bunch of different zany characters that kind of join the fray.
yeah.
But a lot of this work, I can see reflected from the work of Takahashi Rumiko when she does stuff like Urusei Yatsura or Ranma Nibu no Ichi, in which case you get like lots of different characters with different quirks, zany character quirks, and zany powers kind of join the fray. Um, and also, it's a little bit of there's a little bit of well, not even a little bit. I would say there's a lot of inspiration from Tenchi Muyo, which
Oh wow,
is
I haven't heard that in a while. Yeah,
yeah,
Tenchi.
Tenchi Muyo is one of those things wherein you see a lot of the character tension and the character build up from that. I think what late early 90s anime,
Yeah,
which I was a big fan of back when it first came out. Um, so saying that, the thing that makes it really cool and unique is the character interaction, wherein everything is more grounded in everything is a little bit more grounded, it seems, wherein the characters seem to it's first of all, it's more grounded in a real world wherein, like we had mentioned before, actual like characters and like actual places um from Japan are mentioned, which is kind of like a little bit of an in joke, but it kind of makes you feel like, oh, okay, I'm in on the joke if I know it. And also just the fact that it kind of touches upon still the interests of the two characters, which is like yokai and then aliens, and kind of blends them together and makes this kind of like, wait a second, what if there was like other half, like what if when you go into like a boss fight or something like that, like the world kind of darkens and you go into a shadow world, you know? Um
yeah.
all of that stuff is unique. Well, I mean, I would probably say that there's also parallels from different from different works from before, like maybe Bleach and such. But
Mm. Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good
there's
comparison.
I think there's actually such a good kind of magpie-ish abandon to Tatsu's work that that's what you enjoy. You're just like, oh, where is it gonna come? What thing is gonna come out of this manga later?
Yeah.
You know, so you've got like for example, you get like a huge giant crab, like
Oh yeah,
later
it's one
on,
of the. Yeah,
yeah, and
I'm gonna have to.
then there's the sort of lewdness to the themes of the show. It doesn't get into like actual like um uh H kind of like
Yeah,
situations,
yeah,
but they're alluding to it, especially in the
yeah.
first few chapters, and you're just like, oh, okay.
It always stops just before you cross that line. Um, yeah, that's the crab you're referring to. I'd forgotten actually the sighting of the crab. Yeah, it's a yeah, their first maybe their first shared encounter is yeah. Um, but yeah, I like how you mentioned the fact that it does borrow a lot from a lot of different series, a lot of different manga within the shonen genre. But I think what always brought me back to the story and kept me reading was how how earnestly the characters are written, in that they feel like very well-rounded characters, because a lot you
mhm.
mentioned Tenchi Muyo, you mentioned Ranma, and a lot of these classic shonen series have, in my opinion, as much as I love them and have a lot of nostalgia for those series, they have very two-dimensional characters, in my
Mm.
opinion.
If you
And
compare
not
them to this, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not to say that's a negative. It's just that the characters are written so well in this book that you really feel like, oh, I mean, I can relate. I can definitely relate to some of the things that they go through, the things that they feel, especially with Okron and his. I suppose he's obviously got a crush on Momo, but he's too unsure of himself to ever let that manifest in a confession of any kind. But and Momo even can see that he's the kind of person who is a very genuine, gentle individual, but at the same time, she feels that he's too much of a toku to really, I suppose, consider a friend or to hang out with. Of course, that all sort of very very naturally develops, but yeah, I mean, they're just really interesting, fun characters, and I genuinely find them endearing. I do want to spend more time with them. What would you add to that, Jake? Would you
Yeah, I
say
think
that's about right?
this is about right. Because like, and unlike the kind of unlike the series that we had mentioned before, like for example, Urusei Yatsura, or even
Yeah,
Tenchi Muyo, um, it doesn't end up necessarily like a a harem manga,
yeah, yeah,
where suddenly the male character is surrounded by a whole bunch of female characters who are kind of, you know, um, attracted to him. It's more of a kind of equal mix wherein you're just like, oh, okay, we're actually also meeting male characters who are
yeah,
also attracted to the female character. And then
yeah,
you're just like, okay, which way is this? Are there love triangles popping up? Are there things that are,
yeah.
you know, it's fun in the sense that you get characters that actually do that you can actually relate with as the
Mm,
series goes along, and I think that's that's the draw of it as far as
yeah,
the writing.
yeah. And I have to say that the relatability of the characters is, for me, definitely what kept me wanting more. Um, but then there's also the artwork, which we'll get onto next. But definitely there's when you mention a harem sort of series, or the sort of the uh, well, what would you call that? A genre, really, of storytelling in manga. Um, there is another character who really pines for Ocaron's attention. I'll just say her name, Ira, but she will really come into her own as another member of their, if you like, their friendship group. But it's really interesting how it it almost teases that it's going to be a harem in a way, but absolutely isn't, because this other character is also so three dimensional and interesting that it just becomes, it's almost like, I want to say that the all the main characters, it almost feels like a reality show. Like they're all in there in this ridiculous setup, but then at the same
Yeah, I
time,
like that.
you know what I
I
mean?
actually
But
like
it
that.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, but also it's kind of like the reason why people like reality shows, in the sense that you want to see what kind of clashes sort of result in all of these really interesting individuals clashing together or being in the same room for
Hmm.
extended periods of times. And there are times in the story where they have to live together, and that's some of the most fun I got out of the story. Not the not the actual encounters with the phenomena that they're both interested in, but rather how these characters clash and how they develop together. And it is very much an ensemble cast eventually, not in this first volume, but when it gets to that point where you have a really well-rounded group,
Hmm.
um, they're just so interesting to be around. They're people I'd like to hang out with almost. So there's a lot of fun to be had there. Anything else
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
add to that, Jake, before we move on to the art?
Well, I think that it's a nice. The first one, you don't even get to see what the setup's going to be like in
Yeah,
the second and third volumes, because the second and third volumes kind of introduce like the pathos of the series, which is kind of like, wait a second, yeah, some of these characters have some pretty heavy backstories to them. Um, and we don't even, at this point, we don't even know Okarun's backstory at all. Like, he's the one we know least about. So, um, I mean, at the present, at present, which is like March of 2025, we don't know a lot about Okarun. So, you're a lot of this is kind of interesting as the series goes on, because then you see what the characters actually had to go through, or have to go through. Uh, so that's the thing, is like, I think there's certain crucibles that's part of the theme of this manga. You're just like, oh, I have to go through this test in order for me to prove myself, in a way, you know,
yeah,
or the previous characters have literally gone through hell in order for them to get here. So
yeah,
yeah, those are the things that this first volume won't set up, but we'll see in the next few volumes. And that's all I can really
yeah.
say about the story.
Sure. But I will just sort of add one more point there. What you do get thematically from this first book is, and as cliche as it might sound, you get this idea of both main characters are pushing the idea of not to judge a book by its cover.
Hmm.
Both of them have their own insecurities that are very natural, despite, for example, Momo being a very headstrong and popular girl at school. At the same time, there's definitely an absence of affection or relatability that she can gather from the people around her, and Okron sort of fills that gap, or is that piece, that missing piece. And likewise, Momo to Okron is that individual who he felt he could almost geek out with, a friend he could genuinely talk about his interests with, but also at the same time, this really naturally develops over the course of, I think, 5 chapters in this first volume into a really natural friendship almost. And it's obviously forced in the sense that they're put in very dramatic situations, but underneath it all, I think the baseline theme here is about whenever we're more than the sum of our own, we're more than the sum of our parts as individuals. There's we're never a simple canvas that can be read. We're very These are complex characters like real people, and I love that about it. So
Well,
that's all I have to say about the story. Mm.
I think maybe later on, I'd like to allude to the fact that um, it's trauma that kind of shapes the characters,
Yes,
and
good point. Yeah.
it's not necessarily like Momo and Okarun, but the characters who kind of come in,
Mm.
um, and even characters that you would want to label as villains, you kind of go like, well, there's a reason for that, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess that's all we can really say at this early point
Mm.
in the story with the first volume.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on to the art?
Sure. Yeah. So I showed a couple of, I mean, two of the sort of character art um, for both Ken and Momo. But what I want to say to start off with is right off from the very first page, I was smitten by the artwork because um, Tatsu Sensei has such a unique art style in the way that he draws his characters, and most importantly, how he choreographs the action throughout this series, which is really a thing to behold. It is some of the most, as a shonen manga or any manga, it is some of the best artwork I have ever seen, um, old or new. It's just the amount of detail and how kinetic all of the action sequences are. Even simple things like, I mean, look at them both arguing in the having a little scuffle in the school corridor. There's a real sense of understanding anatomy and movement that is so detailed and so natural in all of the panels here that I was naturally drawn to these, not just the writing, but to the characters. They're also very physical. They're also very emotive in all of the panels, and there's also a lot of what I would consider to be mild horror, even in some of these panels, and just the atmosphere that Tatsu Sensei draws around these particular plot lines. Um, how about you, Jake? What did you think of the artwork?
Well, I think that's true. It is the characters are very emotive and it very much is the skill of the artist that kind of says like, wait, okay, yeah, in one scene the characters are very pensive, in one scene the characters are very emotional, and sometimes very comedic in their kind of show of emotion, which is kind of like what you want in certain situations. Um, and that goes through very well. Very solid line work, very solid inking. Um, what the thing is when you get to uh, the thing about the artwork that I really like is the fact that when you get into the huge boss battles,
Yeah.
it doesn't hold back. You're just like, okay, it's a
Oh yeah.
giant freaking crab on top of a train.
Yeah. Yeah.
and then and then you have to try to stop it, and you're just like, how are they gonna do this? This is kind of neat. And
Yeah.
it's the kind of half ridiculousness of it, and maybe the joy of seeing Tokyo half destroyed when you have to go through these battles, and you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
well, they just trashed the entirety of that train line,
Yeah.
and there's got to be 100,000 people dead or something, like injured, but nothing actually
Yeah.
will happen because there's a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina there, but the way
Yeah.
that the way the explosions are, the way the battle scenes are, um, really, really, really doesn't hold back. You're just like,
No.
yeah, that's 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 um that's the payoff to the exposition. That's the payoff to kind of saying like, okay, where is this leading?
Yeah.
Where is this leading to? Um, and sometimes it's an exciting payoff. Sometimes it's a comedic payoff. Sometimes you're just like, what? Okay, so now what? Now what just happened after that large explosion or that large battle? Now they have to do what?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's, I mean, I could pick any one page here, and everything that you described and everything that I was talking about it's all present in every single page of this book. The emotive, how emotive the characters are, the attention to detail, and again the choreography of some of these action sequences, and not just action sequences, but the comedy. The comedy in for me, physical comedy in any medium, whether it be film or sequential art, is
Mm,
always something that I find very, very difficult to pull off. You know what I mean?
No, well,
But
some of it is some of it is comedy without you wanting to laugh. You're just like, it's kind of like watching a Quentin Tarantino film. You're just like, okay, they're in a horrible situation, and then somebody says something like just so offhanded that you're just like,
yeah,
yeah, he can't, that
yeah,
character can't have said that. And at the same time, you're just like, run, run for your life.
yeah. I mean, just showing you these two pages here. It's quite a. I mean, it's a quite a horrific encounter they have here, and I'm not going to say who this is, but it's just the humor comes from how ridiculous and how otherworldly the situations these characters are put in, and how they react to that. It's just a lot of fun.
Hmm.
It's just so much fun, and that is really translated in the artwork. There's also a lot of tenderness, as I mentioned, with the um, how expressionate the characters are, and some of and some of the more emotional sequences or scenes really hit that much harder because the characters are drawn so well, and they're so they I mean they're so kinetic. They just jump off each panel, and because of it, those more emotional sort of elements and moments I think hit a lot harder,
Hmm.
because you just feel that wow, I can almost it's almost as if I can see them before me because they're so well drawn. Um, yeah, that I mean, so basically, I would say for me, the artwork is probably some of the best at the moment, from a mangaka, and certainly for this particular genre, like a shonen. And I say shonen, but this volume's got, and all of them have explicit content, as a disclaimer. And you mentioned some of the more etchy scenes. Again, I mean, this is nothing over the top, but you can definitely tell there's a side to this series where yeah it's borderline etchy but doesn't quite go the whole
Well, yeah,
way
the,
for
the
it to
editors
be.
have to kind of go like, hey, we gotta sell some
Yeah,
books here.
yeah, so it's definitely present, but it's pulled back just enough so it doesn't cross that line.
And
At
actually,
least it hasn't. Yeah,
as
yeah,
you go through, and I think probably I've seen a lot of manga start off this way, where you're just like, oh, okay, it is a bit raunchy, but then
yeah,
as you go through the series, you realize no, it's not about the raunchy things.
no,
It's
yeah,
kind of like it's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, there are some things you have to draw the audience into, but
yeah,
it's not going to be about that. Well, you have to have fan service,
yeah.
like in in a lot of these things.
But again, I would argue that the fan service in this is um, almost tasteful in a way because it's not gratuitous, but at the same time, it almost adds a little bit of it adds to the humor in the notion that it's it it's ridiculous in itself. I don't. It's almost as if it's there. It's written into the story as opposed to it's there to basically get young teenage boys excited. Do you know what I mean? It's done in a way that where it actually it lends itself to the narrative. It lends itself to the humor.
Well,
And
actually,
speaking of
some of it is toilet humor in a way. You're just like,
yeah,
okay,
I think I mean it really does cover pretty much every base I can imagine in terms of humor. There's the physical side. There's the
Slapstick,
the,
yeah.
the slapstick. There's some of the more some of the more tender moments are funny because the characters are reacting in such a realistic way that you feel bad for them, but it's also funny as a result. One of the characters that I particularly like throughout the series is Momo's grandmother. Yeah, I mean, if you can believe that. And there are so many other supporting characters that are just so much fun to be around and to
You
continue
know,
reading on.
now that I look at Momo's grandmother, I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's Bayonetta. It's
Yeah,
Bayonetta.
well, yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, because you honestly took the words out of my mouth because she's a complete badass throughout. She's one of my favorite characters, and yeah, she behaves like Bayonetta. If Bayonetta was a grandmother, that's probably who she would be. Um, but yeah, I guess there's so much I could possibly, I could say about each chapter in the series, but um, the one thing I do want to say, and the strongest praise I have for it, is that it only gets better. So I'm I'm not up to date. I've read up to volume 8. There are now, I think, 11 volumes released in North America and available in the UK. But whatever I've read, it only gets better from here. Um, so yeah, DanDaDan is now an anime series as well. It was adapted late last year. I haven't actually seen it, but
Yeah,
I've heard very good things about it. It's I think the animation studio is the Science Saru, right?
I can't.
Who
I haven't watched it either. I've only seen clips, which I really like.
Yeah,
I actually just want to binge watch the anime when I have the time.
yeah, me
Um,
too.
yeah, and that's something. Maybe we'll even just have an episode on the differences between the anime and the manga.
Yeah,
But hey,
I'd love to do that.
we haven't even done we haven't even done the quintessential anime that I think we both like, which is Naruto, which is one of those things we're in.
Oh yeah,
That's something where we're in.
yeah.
Wow, that actually, now that I think of it, that's something that we should do at some point, like as a manga
Hmm.
and an anime, and as a comparison.
Well, Naruto was the first one of the first manga I ever bought. So there's a lot of history there. But I have to say, to sort of close off my thoughts on Dandadan, is that this deserves all the praise it gets, all the hype that it gets. We are one of countless individuals who have nothing but praise for this series, and rightfully so, because ultimately, to me, this is some of the most fun you will ever experience in comic form, as a manga, as an example of art and exemplary storytelling. You know what it is? If I could just describe Dandadan in one word, joy. It just brings me so much joy. I could not recommend the series enough. It's easily one of my favorite ongoing series, if not up there in the top three, even. Because every time I pick up a new volume, I'm so excited to read it. Perhaps the only other series I can compare this to in terms of me being hyped every time I pick up a volume is something like One Piece. Um, but really, I couldn't give this book any more um, praise or recommend it highly enough. Um, yeah, those are my final thoughts. How about you, Jake? How would you like to close off?
I think I'd like to say, like, I like the fact that it's still available. It's one of those things where um I just want to have something that replaced, like, like every week I would love to I'd love to kind of read a story of Naruto and stuff like that. And these are some of the things that I want to replace those kinds um of uh of I don't know. You know, like when you want to just always have something that you have every week and just say like, well, this kind of gives me comfort or gives me
Yeah,
joy. It's one of those things
yeah,
wherein, yeah, I can see it building up to that. In a sense, it's, of
mm,
course, I'm comparing it to some pretty lofty things like Naruto or uh, like Akira or things like that, wherein it's really established and really as a story it
mm,
goes to new heights and new twists and turns. I want it to be that. I want it to be that. I mean, and it's getting there. And it's, of course, I still highly recommend it. Um but if we come back to this in the next couple of volumes, there's a whole bunch of other things that I'd love to talk about, um
mm.
that I see progression, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I think we definitely need to do a part two to this video because there's so much more that I think we can both talk about in terms of where these characters go, where the story goes, and really in terms of the overarching plot, which is hard to see from the first volume, but is definitely there, and it's very very well told. So yeah, simply put, DanDaDan is a hit, and we'll both be revisiting it, and even off camera, I don't think I mean, we must mention DanDaDan maybe once a month every time we speak to one another, right? It always comes up in a
Yeah.
conversation, and that in itself is testament to how much joy and what a great way to um, escape. I think it's such a great form of escapism. You know, you were talking about how manga like Naruto and even Bleach is sort of I want to say it's comfort food in that you know what to
Yeah. Yeah,
expect,
I think that's what I
it
was
really,
looking for. Yeah.
yeah, it is comfort food, and I think for me, DanDaDan is one of these really warm blankets whereby, and this has actually happened to me several times. I may have had a really bad day for whatever reason, and I pick up a volume of DanDaDan and I will read a chapter, and I kid you not, it never fails to put a smile on my face. And I can't really say that to many series. You know, that's the power of this series. It really does. Um, it really does, if you like, give you that sense of comfort. Yeah, it just you know what you're getting into, but at the same time, it's such a lovable series. So
But
that's
it's
about
the
it from
healing
us, I
power
think.
of the
Yeah,
genre. It's the healing power of
yeah,
the genre, right?
it is. It is. But when it's done as well as it is in DanDaDan, I think it elevates that, if you like, that quality to something even longer lasting. Uh, so yeah, that's about it from myself and Jake. Again, we do try to do a video once a month, but you know things get in the way, and so
But
I
we do
can't.
appreciate you guys watching and liking and subscribing. Make it, and
Yeah,
and also,
absolutely.
comment down below to see, if you've read Dandadan or watched the anime. What do you think of it? What are your first impressions of it? Just like what we've done here.
Yeah, exactly. And if which one do you prefer? Do you think the anime is a worthy alternative to the manga? Let us know. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the episode and take care, whatever you do, and we'll see you very soon.
See you
So,
soon, guys.
see you later. Bye.